The math arrived before the drones did. Somewhere in the Indian Ocean, before the first radar contact, before the first launch warning, a Houthi planner sat down with a spreadsheet. The numbers were simple. One drone, $22,000. One interceptor missile, $4.3 million. Send enough drones and the defender goes bankrupt, stopping them. Not defeated, bankrupt. The strategy wasn't destruction. It was arithmetic. What happened next in the Red Sea didn't just change how the US Navy fights. It exposed something the drone builders didn't see coming. A trap buried inside their own math. And the Navy didn't spring it with a missile. It didn't spring it with a ship. It sprung it with a question no one else was asking. To understand why the drone swarm was supposed to work, you need to understand what a destroyer's magazine actually is, and what it isn't. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer carries 96 vertical launch cells, 96, built into the hull during construction. No expansion slots, no field modifications. Each cell holds one interceptor missile. When the cell is empty, it stays empty until the ship returns to port, ties up at a pier, and waits for specialized reload teams to work through each tube one by one. That process takes weeks. That constraint is older than the ship itself. It was the fixed ceiling of naval air defense for decades, a finite number of bullets for an infinite number of potential threats. Tacticians called it the magazine depth problem. Adversaries called it an opportunity. The Houthi playbook, borrowed from Iranian doctrine, field-tested over 3 years of Red Sea operations, was built entirely around that ceiling. Don't try to outrun the interceptors. Don't try to jam the radar. Just launch enough drones that the defender runs the cells dry before relief arrives. The drone doesn't need to hit the ship. It just needs to force a launch. During a single deployment from 2023 to 2024, one destroyer fired more than 40 interceptors defending commercial shipping lanes and the carrier strike group it was escorting. 40 missiles, gone, 56 cells remaining. The ship was still mission capable, but the clock was running. Here is what made the drone swarm genuinely dangerous. And it wasn't the drones, it was the identification problem. In June 2023, a US destroyer operating near Israel encountered a cluster of drones loitering offshore. Some were hostile, some were Israeli. The radar tracked them all equally. The combat management system couldn't fire. IFF, identification friend or foe, held the engagement back. One drone eventually broke from the group, dropped altitude, and accelerated toward the ship. The ship fired an ESSM interceptor. The drone went down. A second drone appeared immediately behind it, hidden in the radar return of the first. By the time the system processed the second contact, it was inside minimum missile engagement range. The deck gun took it down with a third shell, a few hundred feet away. Read that sequence again. 2 drones flying in tight formation. The first absorbs the missile. The second, masked by the first on radar, closes inside the defense bubble. Then, and only then, does it separate and attack. Either that was accidental geometry, or someone studied the Aegis engagement envelope and designed the attack around it. Naval analysts split on which is worse. The Phalanx close-in weapon system, the last line of point defense before impact, was never triggered. On newer Arleigh Burke variants, the forward Phalanx turret has been removed. The aft turret covers only half the ship's arc. For a brief window during that engagement, the most advanced warship in the world was relying on a deck gun firing manually at a drone closing at jet speeds. The swarm doctrine had found the seam, not in the electronics, not in the radar, in the geometry. The Navy's answer to this problem didn't come from the armaments budget, it came from the energy budget. HELIOS, high-energy laser with integrated optical dazzler and surveillance, is a 60-kilowatt directed energy system now deployed on select Arleigh Burke destroyers. It does not fire a projectile, it fires a beam of infrared light, invisible, silent, moving at the speed of light. The beam locks onto a specific structural point, a sensor dome, a rotor hub, a propeller shaft, and holds there while thermal energy accumulates. 7 seconds of dwell time. That is enough to melt the drone's guidance optics, warp its control surfaces, and force it into an uncontrolled descent. Cost per engagement, 87 cents in diesel fuel. The economics of the drone war just reversed. The attacker spends $22,000. The defender spends less than $1. That $4.3 million interceptor stays in the cell. But HELIOS carries a physics constraint that its designers were never going to engineer away. The open ocean atmosphere, salt aerosols, humidity, thermal turbulence, scatters and bends a coherent laser beam. Beyond roughly 3 nautical miles, the energy disperses too widely to concentrate lethal heat on a target. Inside that window, HELIOS is surgical. Outside it, the atmosphere wins, one target at a time, 3 nautical miles. Against a coordinated swarm of 50-plus drones arriving simultaneously from multiple vectors, HELIOS alone is not enough. The Navy knew this when they deployed it, which means HELIOS was never meant to fight the swarm. It was meant to fight what the swarm leaves behind. The full architecture only reveals itself when you step back far enough to see all 3 layers at once. The outermost ring, the Aegis combat system and its Spy-1 phased array radar. Fixed antenna arrays, no mechanical rotation delay, 360-degree surveillance, simultaneous tracking of hundreds of contacts. At 100 nautical miles, SM-2 and SM-6 interceptors engage the largest threats first. Fighter aircraft from the carrier air wing work the 50 nautical mile band. EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft jam and deceive at 30 miles. By the time any surviving drones reach the 3 nautical mile envelope where HELIOS operates, a swarm of 100 has been cut to perhaps 5, perhaps 8. HELIOS was designed for stragglers, not stampedes. That short range is not a limitation the engineers failed to solve. It is the precise range the system was designed to need. The problem is the middle zone, between 30 nautical miles and 3. That band is where a coordinated swarm poses the greatest danger. Electronic warfare can confuse GPS-dependent drones. It cannot destroy them. HELIOS cannot reach them. Firing interceptor missiles at everything in that band defeats the economic logic that justified building HELIOS in the first place. That gap is what Project Meteor is designed to fill. Meteor is not a laser. It radiates a wide cone of high-intensity microwave energy across a 60-degree arc of sky. Every drone inside that cone, 5, 15, 40, absorbs the pulse simultaneously. Microwave energy enters drone electronics through the antennas they must leave open to receive navigation signals, induces phantom currents through circuit board traces, and burns transistors from the inside out. The drone does not respond to commands. It does not reboot. The silicon is gone. One pulse. Entire formation. No sequential engagement. Meteor is still a prototype. The engineering challenge is not power, it is deconfliction. A microwave cone broad enough to sweep a drone formation is also broad enough to reach the Aegis radar arrays, the F-35 avionics on the flight deck, the missile seekers on the escort destroyers. Friendly fire at the speed of light. The combat computer must choreograph every firing window to ensure the cone never sweeps across a live system. That integration problem, not the physics, is what keeps Meteor off ships today. Here is the strategic pivot that changes the entire framing of this story. Every analysis of directed energy weapons focuses on what they destroy. The more important question is what they force the enemy to spend. Against a 60-kilowatt laser, an adversary has 3 theoretical responses. Coat the drone in reflective material. Apply ablative shielding. Spin the drone on its axis to spread thermal load. Each countermeasure works, briefly. Reflective coatings vaporize within milliseconds at 60 kilowatts. Ablative layers add 15 to 20 pounds to a drone built around a precise payload-to-range ratio. The laser's tracking system, refreshing at up to 2,500 frames per second, reacquires a spinning drone's weak point faster than the drone can rotate away from it. Against Meteor, the theoretical answer is a Faraday cage, conductive shielding that blocks external microwave energy. It also blocks GPS signals, command links, and radar altimeters. A drone that cannot receive navigation data cannot fly. The shield that protects it from Meteor is the same shield that blinds it. So the adversary turns to radiation-hardened electronics, military-grade components engineered to survive electromagnetic pulses. They exist. They work. A rad-hardened drone survives Meteor's pulse. It also costs between $120,000 and $220,000. The drone that cost $22,000, the one whose cheapness made the swarm strategy viable, now costs 10 times as much. The 40-to-1 cost advantage collapses to roughly 10-to-1, and HELIOS still fires at 87 cents. The Navy does not need directed energy weapons to destroy every drone. It needs them to make drones expensive. Every ablative layer, every Faraday cage, every radiation-hardened chip is a tax on the strategy itself. The economics that made the swarm a threat become the economics that make it unaffordable. 3 layers, 3 kill mechanisms, 3 cost structures. The outer ring burns expensive missiles only on threats that genuinely demand them. hypersonic cruise missiles, anti-ship ballistic missiles, weapons no beam of light can stop. The middle ring, when Meteor reaches the fleet, will sweep drone formations for the price of running the generators. The inner ring burns each leaker for less than a cup of coffee. The vertical launch cells stay full. The expensive rounds wait for the threats they were built to stop. But the question that engineering cannot yet answer remains open. Meteor is not operational. Every month it remains in development. The destroyers in active theaters burn interceptors against threats that should never have required a kinetic response. The missile stockpile is finite. The engineering timeline is uncertain. The drone operators are not waiting. The swarm strategy assumed the defender would always play the same game. Expensive missiles against cheap drones, burning down a finite magazine until the ship had to retreat. What it didn't account for was the possibility that the defender would stop playing that game entirely. The US Navy didn't win by stockpiling more missiles. It won by changing what a missile is for.